Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah Evanja, and I'm Senior Associate Director of International Programs in the College of Agriculture. And I want to start by just sort of saying that we decided to change the title of this seminar. So if you want to leave, you've been warned. It was the role of biotech in Africa, but we wanted to turn this into a question to inspire more discussion. And so we're asking the question, is there a role for biotechnology in Africa? And we hope that the discussion today, you'll all engage in it and help us address this question. So, advocates of biotechnology say that agricultural biotechnology could be part of the solution to achieving food security in light of global climate change, while opponents of the technology say that it's not appropriate for smallholders in sub-Saharan Africa, or it's not accessible to smallholder farmers across Africa. So there's a range of viewpoints on this question, and so we have brought a diverse group of people here today to help us unpack this issue. So we have a molecular biologist, an agricultural officer working with the Ministry of Agriculture, we have a journalist, and we have a science communications expert. And we will today go back and forth between West Africa and East Africa. We have representation from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Zambia, and from Tanzania. So the format today will be that each of these experts will offer their comments on this question for about 7 minutes each, and then we'll open it up for discussion with all of you. So my question to each of these 4 panelists is there a role for biotechnology in Africa? And our first speaker is Dr. Daniel Dzidzienyo, and he's a lecturer at the Biotechnology Center at the University of Ghana in Legon. And he's also the deputy center leader of the West African Center for Crop Improvement, an institute that's near and dear to us here at Cornell. Prior to his appointment as lecturer at the Biotechnology Center, he was a part-time teaching assistant and a postgraduate assistant at the Division of Plant and Crop Sciences at the University of Nottingham in the UK. And he holds a BSc in Agriculture from the University of Ghana and a PhD in Molecular Biology from the University of Nottingham. And his research interests include the integration of modern molecular tools for developing resilient varieties of root and tuber crops for food and nutrition security in Africa. So Daniel, is there a role for biotechnology in Africa?
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the opportunity, and thank you all for coming to listen to my views on an issue which is very dear to my heart. That is there a role for biotechnology in Africa? And as Sarah mentioned, I'll be coming from Ghana's point of view. It will interest you to know that about 60% of Ghana's population is involved in agriculture. And you're probably thinking, why are you guys not feeding the world then? It's a lot of factors contribute to the challenges we have in Africa. And we all know that Africa's agriculture is plagued with a lot of, or is characterized by a lot of factors. Like it's rain-fed mostly, and again, it's subsistence. And as I mentioned, though 60% of the Ghana's population is into agriculture, about 5% of the population is food insecure. People are hungry, and people are dying of hidden hunger. I mean, it's not like we sit down to do nothing, but it's just unfortunate that most of the farmers, for instance, relied on unimproved seeds. And again, we all know the challenges involved in or plagued with by Africa's agriculture, like the biotic and abiotic factors. And again, climate change is not helping the situation any further. However, farmers need access to improved varieties developed through what? Modern technology. Now, for us in Ghana, we are fortunate to have an environment which is not too hostile towards modern biotechnology. We have past and previous governments who have the political will to do something about our agriculture. The current president, when he came into office a year ago, launched a policy called Planting for Food and Jobs. And over the weekend at a festival, he mentioned that we need to modernize agriculture so as to improve the livelihoods of farmers in Ghana. Again, it will interest you to know that in Ghana, farmers are one of the most poorest people in the world. And again, I guess that applies to most of the African countries we have. Farmers are one of the most poorest. But then I was in US a while, I think 2 or 3 years ago, somewhere in Michigan, and interacting with farmers, you realize that farmers are actually one of the most richest people in this part of the world. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then farmers in Ghana, the business of, or the farming sector or the agricultural sector is actually not even attractive to the youth. So that's why when the government came into power, they tried to put in policies to ensure that agriculture in Ghana is more productive and self-sufficient and sustainable. When it comes to modern biotechnology, like the genetic engineering, Ghana actually has signed the biosafety bill in 2011. And since then, we have been involved in a couple of activities. Ghana currently is not into commercial cultivation of GE crops or GM crops. However, Ghana is currently doing confined field trials, leading to the release of commercialization of these GE crops developed through modern biotechnology. And again, as I mentioned, at the currently reconstituted inauguration of the Biosafety Board, the sector minister made clearly known to the public that the government is in support of modern biotechnology, and that we should fast-track efforts to ensure that products as resulting out of modern biotechnology are made available to farmers in order to increase productivity, alleviate poverty, and again what? Provide nutrition and then again end hunger in Ghana. So for now, I would say the environment in Ghana is conducive to embrace this technology so that as once upon a time when the Green Revolution started, Africa has packed the bags and the Green Revolution has missed us. This is an opportunity for Africa, for Ghana, to ensure that we tap into these advanced technologies that are resulting out of science and technology, so we are not left behind, because people are suffering, people are hungry, and we need to do something about it. And the government of the day and previous governors have mentioned believed the power of this modern technology that will help alleviate the plight of majority of Ghanaians. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. Our next speaker is Ackson Mwanza. He's a current Humphrey Fellow in international programs, comes from Zambia, and he's an agricultural extension specialist working at the Ministry of Agriculture there, senior agricultural officer, working at the ministry there. And his program focus is improving the livelihoods of small-scale farmers in rural communities through the development of successful pluralistic extension management systems and project design, implementation, and management. Improvement in coordination of staff, results-based management, and agricultural policy analysis. So welcome, Ackson. I pose the same question to you. Is there a role for biotechnology in Africa?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. For starters, someone in the audience, as I was walking in, asked where I come from. And I said, I come from Zambia. Then they kept asking me where Zambia is. Well, Zambia is in the southern part of Africa, and it's famous for the mighty Victoria Falls. We house that. So you need to find time once in your lifetime to visit. Yeah. Zambia has a population of around 14 million. And of that population, over 60% live in rural communities. And of that who live in the rural communities, over 80% are into farming. What kind of farming? Most of them are smallholder farmers, small-scale farmers. We have medium-scale farmers, and we have commercial farmers, but the majority of them are small-scale farmers. So these are farmers that have land that is less than 2 hectares. Here you use acres, and we use hectares. That have 2 hectares or less than a hectare. And that is, a hectare is roughly around 2.5 or 2.4 acres if you do the conversions. So these are people that have small fields that are next to each other. And because they are small-scale farmers, they do not have irrigation facilities. So most of their farming is rain-fed dependent. And so when we look at the landscape, these are the major contributors of Zambia's food situation, because we produce around 3.6 metric tons of corn, because that's our staple food. And we only consume about 1.5. So we always have these supplies. For the last 4 or 5 seasons, we've had bumper harvests. So we produce enough of the staple crop that's dependent on. And so in the early days of genetic engineering or biotechnology in the 1990s, people got the information that there is this new technology, and at the time we were still grappling with the issue of hybrids, because people were used towards using traditional crops. We had OPVs, the open pollinated varieties. So when the hybrids came in, people thought this was a propaganda by the seed companies so as to look for markets for their production, for their seeds that they brought, the hybrids. And so it took us time to change the mentality of the farmers for them to accept this hybrid that came onto the market. So now we came now in the 1990s, late 1990s, with the biotechnology science of it, where we have genetically engineered crops. So farmers thought, now what do you take us for? Because we had OPVs, you say these are not good because you need high yields. You brought hybrids, and now you're telling us to go from hybrids into the genetically engineered crops. And what are the implications of all this? So when that happened, the government of Zambia had to sit through parliament and enacted a bill, the Biosafety Act, which was signed in 2007. And later that led to establishment of an authority, which is the Biosafety Authority. And that was mandated to regulate the research, the handling, the transportation of all these genetically engineered products, could be in the health sector or in the agri sector. So the major challenges around biotech for us were the issues of control, because we are not able to handle contamination. Because when we say we have to do the isolation distance of our farmers observing the 400-meter distance isolation, we have challenges with our small-scale farmers because their fields are small and they are right next to each other. So that will not be handled. And when we look also at the time of planting, when we say farmers have to plant at different dates so as to allow for tasseling to happen at different times to avoid the issues of contamination, that also cannot happen in our case because most of our farmers depend on rain. And so when it comes to planting, they plant at the same time. And so you cannot ask someone to switch because they will not have anything, they won't have any water if they delay their planting. And so these were some of the issues around handling issues of contamination. Then the principle that we push for as a Zambian government, hope I don't sound like a politician, are issues around any technologies or any advancements that are coming into our country should not undermine the local knowledge and the local customs and the local traditions and beliefs. So if the biotech was to come and say, this is the idea and this is the ultimate, then where do we place the other knowledge that we've amassed over the years? What we want is the coexistence without one technology hindering the progress or the advances that I've made so far with regards to other technologies. And in the aspect of environmental biodiversity preservation, well, concerns were raised to say, okay, now we have produced, they wanted to introduce the BT code, which is resistant to some stock borers. And now the idea was, are we looking at wiping out a certain kind of species that that's sort of a menace to us, but what happens to the ecosystem balancing? Are we playing a small god in a way by thinking that we are better placed to protect our interests? What about the interests of other living organisms? And so the local traditions and beliefs were in contrast with the technology at the time. And that is why when the National Biosafety Authority was established, that was, as regards agriculture, that was the principle for us to allow. You should bear in mind that when we started with this technology initially, we were a country that had zero tolerance to biotechnology improvements or genetic engineering. But over the years, with the establishment of that authority, that was to give room to say, okay, let's look at this technology, let's look at the local challenges, and let's produce local solutions addressing some of the concerns of our people, because you cannot just bring whatever it is you bring, because most of the information that was availed to us was coming from the marketers of this technology, based on what they produced and looking for markets for the technology. And so as a result, we thought this information might not have the credibility it needs to have, because it has to be independent. And so in the long run, a number of people have been given permits to engage in research and to sort of within containment areas and to isolate it. And so all this is work in progress. Is there a role for biotechnology in our country? Of course there is, only except if it will address the issues and the challenges that have been raised by the people, and only if that technology will not sort of overtake the other technologies and the other crops that we have on the market. Because what we need is coexistence of all these technologies for people to have an option to promote one while not disturbing the others that are there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ackson. We're going to move back to West Africa and hear from Nkechi Isaac. She is a science journalist with Leadership Newspaper, a national newspaper headquarters in Abuja, Nigeria, and she's been actively practicing journalism for over 8 years and has the science and technology desk for the newspaper with a special interest in modern agricultural biotechnology. Her interest in biotechnology has sparked a lot of capacity building on the subject matter both within and outside Nigeria, and she is a 2016 Cornell Alliance for Science Global Leadership Fellow. She has a bachelor's degree in English language and literature and is currently finishing her master's in English language at Nasarawa University in Kebbi State, Nigeria. Nkechi, is there a role for biotechnology in Nigeria?
Hello everyone. I'll start by giving you a little background about Nigeria. We currently have a population of over 180 million people. And we are looking at, there are projections that by 2015, we'll have like over 400 million people, being the third largest in the world, just behind China and India. So, given to this, we have a challenge, a visible challenge with food security. Because currently, obviously, as it is right now, we are importing more than half of our staple crops from outside Nigeria, which shows that already conventional farming is already failing for us. Now, if we are going to feed our population by 2050, and if we are going to have food security, we need biotechnology to boost agriculture, to produce more food. Now, apart from that, we also, biotechnology still has a role to play when it comes to our economic development. Nigeria is a country that has, our main source of export of getting money is oil. And recently there was a dip in the oil price and Nigeria went into massive recession. Now, the Nigerian government is looking at diversifying the economy, going into other fields. And one of the key areas the government is looking at is agriculture. And there is no way you can generate more money, boost the economy by subsistence farming. You need to go into mechanized farming. And that is where we need agricultural biotechnology. We are not afraid of biotechnology. Our government, I think in 1995, created an agency to look into ways we can exploit this new technology. So the National Biotechnology Development Agency was created. And in 2000, we signed the Cartagena Protocol, which was rectified in 2003, which means we have a law. And then I think in 2015, in April 2015, the biotechnology bill was signed into law, which means we are already in the process of having biotechnology, using it in our country. So when we signed the biotechnology bill into law, a regulatory agency was created. It's called the National Biotechnology Management Agency, to regulate the application of modern agricultural biotechnology in the country. So we have started the process. Presently, we are running field trials for some crops with a view of maybe commercializing at least 2 by 2018. We are looking at BT cowpea and cotton, commercializing them by 2018. So apart from the economy, apart from agriculture, I believe biotechnology also has a role to play in the environment and in the health sector. Those are potentials we are looking to explore. So I believe there is a role for agricultural biotechnology in the development of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkechi. Our fourth speaker, before we open it up for discussion, is Philbert Nyinondi, and he's a lecturer at Sokoine University of Agriculture, specializing in science communication. He's also an Alliance for Science Fellow, who was appointed by the Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology to coordinate the National Forum on Agricultural Biotechnology. Mr. Nyinondi has considerable experience in public engagement, interacting with smallholder farmers, journalists, scientists, and policy decision makers in Tanzania, specifically around this issue. Philbert, is there a role for biotechnology in Africa and specifically in Tanzania?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. For the first time when I was asked to give a talk in this seminar, I was like, should I really participate? Because I'm seeing three things here. How can I talk the situation of Africa for an international community where someone has never missed a meal, and you want to make such a person think of someone who missed the meal for the whole day, someone with a family? It's very difficult. And then, should we really be discussing whether African farmers need a technology, or how can we make them access technology? Because to me, this is like an old discussion. It should be over. We have no doubt on science, and we need a technology. Always we need a technology to make our life better. The technology cannot be used in America. American farmers using it, and then you start asking whether the other farmers in the other parts of the world really need such a technology. It is a sabotage to humankind, indeed. We should be thinking, how can we make such a people access technology? So, I will tell you a small story. I was lucky to be part of a delegation from Tanzania, which was facilitated to go to Burkina Faso to see the BT cotton field. We had 5 farmers on the trip. Immediately the farmers saw the BT cotton in Burkina Faso, they grabbed the seed. They decided to hide the seed, knowing that they're not going to take it to Tanzania, but they put it in their clothes. Imagine someone putting the seed in the pockets of their trousers, shirts. finding a way to make sure they're getting those seeds to Tanzania. They were lucky to pass the immigration and check service of Burkina Faso. But arriving in Tanzania, they were checked and those seeds were confiscated by the immigration and the crop protection department. The first thing these farmers was telling the media immediately after moving out of the airport, it was our seeds. Why are they doing this to us? We brought our seed. We managed to get them from Burkina Faso. Those who were supposed to protect their seed, they let us go, and yet our people are stopping us. Why are you doing this to us? We want the better seeds like what other farmers are accessing. They felt being disabled to compete with other African farmers, and that was a small case. So you can talk whatever you want to talk, you can say whatever you feel like saying, but indeed the technology is required in Africa. 1 out of 3 Africans go hungry every year, and that is the world statistics. The highest prevalence rate of poverty and hunger is in Africa. Should we really sit down and start asking, does any technology that can at least add 5% or save out of 200 million and 20,000 who are going hungry every year in Africa? If we can get a technology that can at least change the life of only 20 million, do we doubt about that technology? If that technology, if we have 200 people dying each year, and then you have a technology that can save life for 20 people, will you keep it in the lab or somewhere and start asking, should we rescue the life of such people? It is indeed, and I will keep telling you, this is indeed against human rights. We are spending a lot of time discussing something which does not help African farmers. We are keeping the statistics all over for decades, 5 years ago, 50 years ago, the same Africa, Africa, Africa. Why are we using technology to change the lives of others and put a lot of question whether we should use the same technology for Africa? I happen to work with farmers, and wherever I go, I feel like crying. Why is this happening? Why are we like this? When there is a technology, not only about technology, but around the world, there is a lot of technology that can help African farmers. But such technology, to me, it has been kept away from Africa. And that could be for a specific purpose or for not valuing human rights. Feeling these people can live like animals in the world or whatever. So when I meet someone who is saying, deny such a person a technology because of any particular reason, why others are given an opportunity to choose, and yet you want to decide, this one should not access. I am the one to decide, should you get this technology or not? Provide all technologies, provide all instruments, and let African farmers decide. Let African decide. It should be time, not anyone to decide, but providing all opportunities, equal opportunities for them to change their life. So I managed to talk to farmers. I didn't know I'm going to have this opportunity, but I have a small crib. You can look at it and decide whether African farmers need technology or not.
Nitalichukua, si ni nzuri? Na nitalichukua tena kwa moyo mzuri mno. Dawa yani mbegu ina dawa kabisa yenyewe. Yaani hapa hamna matatizo. Sasa mbegu ambazo tunataka zile mbegu ambazo za kisasa ambazo zinamletea mkulima matumaini. Ambazo sasa anaweza akapata kabisa vizuri inavyotakiwa.
Madaktari mnajua dawa, mtuletee dawa tupande ndizi tule chakula. Sasa njaa tumekufa. Naona nina familia mimi, watoto wangu watano wote wamekufa. Niko tu majonzi. Mwingine amekufa mwezi wa 3. Niko kwenye majonzi. Naomba kama mna dawa mtupatie na mimi nipate chakula nishibe, naache kulilia watoto alafu nikajililia na watoto na mimi.
Mheshimiwa Magufuli atusaidie sana. Mkoa wa Kagera tumekufua na njaa na mnyauko. Sisi tuko sana kulima, lakini na vishawishi vya kulima vimeshuka.
Tungeliomba sasa serikali ili mkulima imletee mbegu ambayo haiathiriki na ugonjwa wa patopato, tungeliunga mkono 100%.
Tena na hii mihogo vile vile tuko tunaomba angalau serikali tusaidie mabwana ugani kila wilaya, angalau watusaidie kutupatia mbegu za mihogo yaoteshwe, ipandwe tu mihogo hata shamba moja kama eka moja, ili hiyo mihogo angalau tunapata mbegu kwa ajili ya mbegu za kisasa za mihogo, ili tuweze kupambana na ili tuweze kuondokana na tatizo la haya magonjwa ya mihogo.
Kitabu hili hakuna lolote lingi la kusema nini na nini. Inayolingana na ukame wa Dodoma. Inayolingana na ukame wa Dodoma. Mihogo, iwe nini, yani chagua mbegu ile inayolingana na ukame.
Kwa maana mmekuja wana kilimo, tunajua mtafanyia kazi, mtatuletea mbegu inayolingana na eneo letu. Na mvua ya hapa Dodoma ni ukame, mvua ni ndogo.
Ni kwamba ni kweli watu wanataka kulima, lakini uwezekano wa kupata mbegu ambazo ni halisia na hali ya maeneo husika haipo. Kwamba sisi tunahitaji mbegu ambazo zimetafutiwa na mbegu ambazo zitakuwa na tija kwa sisi wakulima wadogo.
Tatizo kubwa ni njaa, yani muhogo umekuwa na tatizo kubwa la kuugua. Yaani hapo tunahangaika na chakula, watu tunanunua tunakula kwa kulenga yani. Yaani walio wengi ni kulala njaa na kushinda njaa. Sasa kama rais wetu mnampelekea hizo taarifa, yani hatuone kabisa huko ajue kwamba watu tuna njaa kali. Yaani ukipanda mihogo inaoza. Yaani hata uwezo ukaichimba ukapata hata amboni moja. Yaani ukipanda hata kama ni eka 5 unaweza usiambulie kitu. Sasa watu wamekuwa ni wakunua mara kulala njaa kushinda njaa, yani ni shida kabisa.
Ndio shamba kwa mwezi wa 11 tulipanda, lakini zilinyesha mvua za kuotesha tu. Baada ya hapo kama mnavyoona, haijakuja tena mvua, ukame umeingia, mahindi kama hivi mnayaona yamekauka.
That is it. Farmers do not really talk about biotech or GM or anything, but what they really need is a technology that can transform their lives. They needed this technology 50 years ago, and they still need it now. So should we really continue with this discussion, or close it, or try to rephrase and think how can we help such farmers access the technology? Thank you.
Okay, so you've heard 4 different perspectives from 4 countries at various stages in the development of biotech across Africa. Let's open it up for discussion. I'll take a few questions from the audience, and then we'll do a round of responses, and then we'll cast out again for some questions. So let's start back there with Nasib, the Cali. We'll come back up to Dr. Davies, and then we'll take a question from Colette. And if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Nasib Mwanza. I'm from Uganda. I'm a 2015 fellow. My question goes to anyone on the panel. I'm wondering what you think about those who feel like the challenges surrounding the smallholder farming systems in sub-Saharan Africa are too complex to prescribe a single solution. And instead of adding biotech to already a system which is seemingly leaking, you're not helping much, but rather burdening it more. What do you think? Adding biotech, is it gonna help fixing these challenges or burden the system more? Thank you.
Thank you for your very interesting and provocative talks. I'm interested if it seems quite clear that all the panel is very active in promoting biotech in your countries. Is there a reason to not have a role for biotech in your country? What is the other side of the discussion?
Okay, Dr. Davies?
Okay, yes, there was a very interesting set of talks. So I have a question following up Philbert's comment, which was, we are being denied the technology. So my question is, who is denying you the technology? And my opinion is it's the politicians. Now, I've lectured on this topic in 11 countries around the world, and I was in Zambia and Botswana, and I met with farmers, and they were telling me we need BT cotton because one farmer said, for 1 hectare, I walk 45 kilometers every season. Well, I talked about that, but I didn't talk about herbicide-resistant cotton. And the farmers said, tell us about herbicide-resistant cotton. I said, well, you wouldn't want that. You mean you've got to walk before you can run? They said, no, we've seen it in South Africa. And they said, we have to go through our fields 5, 6, 7 times weeding. We want more. Why don't they have it? In my opinion, it was the politicians who are not farmers. I'd be interested in your comment about that.
Thank you. Finally, Platt?
Yeah. I'm reflecting on the figures by Mwanza. It says farmers produce 3 times more than what they need. And from the 2016 World Hunger Index report, Zambia, 47.8% of Zambians go hungry. And 7 of the children under 5 are malnourished. So I'm wondering, is it the IFIC report that's not telling us the truth, or Mwanza's report or statistics is not clear? May you please help to clarify first?
Great. So we'll just maybe each panelist can choose one of those to comment on.
Okay, since I have the microphone, I'll kickstart. I'll try to answer Nasib's question. Technologies have been developed for agriculture over the years, and we can attest that they have contributed to solving some of the challenges that we have in agriculture. GA technology is also a technology that has been developed in the current age, and I believe integration of this technology into crop improvement programs could help solve some of the challenges that we have with current agriculture. And the evidence are there to show that truly this technology can help improve agriculture and then improve the livelihoods of farmers and consumers worldwide. So I believe, yes, when integrated into current breeding programs, it has a role to play and can solve some of the challenges we have.
Thank you very much for the questions. Zambia is largely dependent on cereals, with the major cereal being corn. You call it corn, we call it maize. It's the same thing, it's maize. So when it comes to production, we buy almost over half of what is produced by the farmers, by the Food Reserve Agency for reserves. But what we notice is a situation where when farmers produce in their fields, they form cooperatives, and those cooperatives are given the mandate to approach the FRA, Food Reserve Agency, for selling. And so they sell whatever it is they would have produced. But before we do the selling, we do a pre-season forecast, okay, at the beginning of the season to project how much we expect to get. And at the end of the season, we do the actual forecast to see how much we would have produced, okay. So there is no direct correlation between the per capita production and the overall production of the country. When we look at what we produce, those figures, they are national figures for like covering everyone, but we do not narrow it down to an individual's production. So you find that some farmers will be very productive compared to others, and so you expect those that would have produced less to be on the losing end or the suffering end. Then, as regards malnutrition, we find that, like I said, we depend largely on cereals. Okay, so this is when now we've sort of over the past few years pushed for crop diversification to promote different food eating habits, to promote different diets for us to cover up. Because you find that we consume too much of calories, too much of starch, and less of these other foods. So malnutrition might be in other areas, but not necessarily in the staple food, which is corn, because our reserves are always full for the past 4 seasons, and we have been exporting to the region, like SADC region, for the past 3-4 years now. All right, and that's my comment on that. As regards those other figures, maybe it should be streamlined to what particular vitamin, if it's vitamin, whether it's vitamin A or whether it's particular food crop that we're talking about. But when we're talking about the major food crop, which is corn, I can safely say that we are safe. Of course, there might be 1 or 2, these things. Then as regards who prevents, I want to make a comment on the issue that politicians might be the ones preventing this technology from reaching the people. Well, it's twofold, maybe threefold. There is the scientists' point of view, and the general populace point of view, and there's the truth. So the gap should be in us trying to narrow down that truth aspect. What do we mean? We might blame it on the politicians, but sometimes it could be an aspect of scientists, because when a technology is promoted or developed, there's a certain way in which you need to package it for the end user, who is the farmer, who will buy into whatever technology you have produced. Of course, the farmer will ask questions to say, but how do we address this? How do we address that? How do we address all these aspects? So it's up to the scientists and the people involved, this example, the ministry, to say, okay, let's address these concerns. Are we going to take care of them? Yes, we can deal with this and that way and that way. But the politician, of course, his concern is then figures in terms of votes, in terms of numbers. What are the people talking? What are the people saying? Do I promote something against what they are talking about? No. So he will go for the majority voice. Of course, leaving out a few people that would be totally against that. But all he will concern himself with is, do I get the votes? Do I get to stay in power because of having gotten the backing of the majority of the people? So we might blame it on the politicians. But I feel it will take concerted efforts, all of us together, scientists, politicians, farmers, everyone on the round table, and say, how do we address this concern if you have any concern? Is there a way around it? Is there something we can do together as a unit? Because if we start now shifting blame on one another, it might not help us much, because everyone has their own concern. Who knows, maybe the scientist, all he wants is a market for the development, for the science that is produced, and the politician wants the people to back him up. So it can be 2 and 4, blaming each other. Then my comment on, there was one that was raised on, is there a reason for not doing this? Well, not directly, but in an indirect kind of way. Like I said, as I was making a point on the politicians and the people's voice and people's vote, it's not that the people do not want it. The people would want it, but they want reason for doing it, reason for them to accept it. Convince them enough that this technology you're introducing will not affect them as regards whatever they already have. There have been other developments before. We've had hybrids, we've had very good performing hybrids in terms of yields and what have you. So convince them why they need this and not that. And it shouldn't be why they need this and not that, but it should be that they need this alongside that and alongside that. And they have the whole range of spectrum for them to choose from. And so if one, for the Zambian context, if a science will come in that will hinder the progress of others as regards contamination, say cross-pollination and whatever, and this science or the other local varieties will over the time become also genetically engineered because they would have picked up certain traits of this and that, then people will question that because they do not want to do away with this, but they want everything for them to have a wider choice. Thank you.
Now, okay, in the Nigeria scenario, you know, are there concerns about biotechnology? Yes, there are concerns. It will be a lie if we try to gloss over the issue that, yes, we are all okay with it. But people have concerns about, it's a natural thing for people to have concern about any new technology that is coming. But as they say it, everything in life is a trade-off. You check the advantage and then the disadvantage. Which is heavier? Do we go on using massive pesticides, or do we reduce the use of pesticides? Everything is a trade-off. Now, if you go in that line, you will know that biotechnology is already being used for over 20 years, and there is no recorded incident of any risk attached to it. So people have concerns about biotechnology in Nigeria, and that concern is also being addressed by the government. That is why we have the National Biosafety Management Agency to address any concern that relates to the application of biotechnology in Nigeria. So, as far as I'm concerned, we are good to go.
Yeah, thank you for a good number of questions. I will go first to the question from Nasib Mwanza from Uganda. He wants to know if biotech adds a burden to Africa. And from the scenario he was trying to describe, it's like a condition of cancer. Do we have a cure for cancer? Do we try to stop a particular drug which is coming up on the market on the ground that the one we have not yet been proven they can work? Or you open up for anything that can help out? So the situation in Africa, as it is now, and it has been for the 50 years, you cannot deny people to access the technology on the ground that what we have now, the system the way it is, it cannot be moved. I think the only way to change the situation we have is the better technology. So biotech adds on, not a burden, it adds on solutions for existing situation. And the question from Professor here, in his opinion, politicians are the one denying African farmers to access technology. But the reality is, he is the first denying African farmers to access the technology. Why? If you find me doing a crime and you keep quiet, you are also helping me to do that. Professor may have provided donation that went to organizations that are creating fear, that are robbing African politicians not to take action. The money he donated here in the US went to Africa, robbed African farmers, robbed politicians. Let's keep quiet about this technology, or let us keep this technology out of Africa. So that's the scenario. It starts with you. If you are not taking any action to help African farmers access technology, you are the first one denying them access to that technology. And the second, the donation you are making every day to NGOs that go to Africa with the intention of doing development and creating anti-science movement, they are also the reason why the technology is not yet in Africa. So the politicians in Africa, they are responding as such to the effect, to the situation you are creating here. If America would stand and say technology should go to Africa, if American people were friends indeed of African, and say we want the situation in Africa to change today and technology should be available, things would have been different. But because American people has chosen to keep quiet, American professors who know the truth, was no doubt science, they decided to keep quiet. They are helping all NGOs, all activists who are saying no to technology and trying to move the situation in Africa on that ground. So my first blame comes to intellectuals, comes to American people, comes to all people who think Africans should get technology, and yet they are keeping quiet. Indeed, keeping quiet, like they are not in this world, they're in different planet, and other organisms on a different one. That's a sabotage I was talking about, and I will keep saying it's a sabotage to humankind. So African politicians, to me, they are not to blame. It's because we wanted the situation to be like that. Yes, there's a concern on the other side, and it's because of the information people are provided, and we have been contributing, facilitating, and speeding up to access wrong information instead of actual information. That's what I can say to you, madam. Thank you.
Okay, we have come to the end of the hour, but there may be, I offered another round of questions. So if any students need to go to class, feel free to go ahead and go, but we will take another round. Stay a few more minutes. KB, you have a question, and then Lucia, any other questions for this? This will be the last round, so final chance. Yeah, right here, and then a fourth one here. So, and Patricia. Okay, so quickly your questions, and then we'll just have some quick round of responses.
This is to the entire panel, which discussed about the role of biotech in Africa. So each of you mentioned that there is a National Biosafety Committee, and that there are rules and regulations which have been drafted and which have been endorsed. If you look at the rules and the guidelines for release, you will see that most of the African countries except South Africa is following what's called a precautionary principle. And who has been pushing this precautionary principle? We all know. You have two sides, right? One is science-based regulations based on science you approve. And the other one is precautionary principle. That means, you have to test a product for 100 years, 50 years, God knows how many years. And we all know from where that thing is coming. And everybody have actually approved those guidelines. How do you change it? If you don't change your guidelines, I'm pretty sorry to say that Africa will never see a biotech product in the field. It will only go to places where there is a science-based regulatory approval.
KB, can I ask, who is responsible for that precautionary?
It's the Europeans.
Yeah.
Lucia, I think you were next.
My name is Lucia de Souza. I'm from Brazil. My question is to Zambia. I think I cannot pronounce your name, that's why I'm going to our country. I think that the issue of coexistence for maize in your country is very important. That's what I understood from what you said. And I think I understood 400 meters distance for coexistence, and I was surprised by the number because it seems a lot for other countries that are cultivating GM maize. For instance, Brazilian law, they put like 20 meters and 10 rows of conventional maize, and they managed to do it. So that's in the law, and that's probably exaggerated when they got to this number. So I was wondering if in Zambia they made some field trials to test the distance or something, where this number 400 meters come from.
So it was mentioned that 60% of the population of Ghana is involved in agriculture. In 1900, about 40% of the U.S. population was involved, and now it's 2, right? So can economies of scale, adoption of biotechnology and mechanization cause job displacement? And obviously, like you're so passionate about, I agree, it's a very strong net positive. But what kind of policies can coincide with the adoption of these technologies so that we can see some of the deleterious effects mitigated?
Great. Kennedy, your question.
Okay, thanks, panelists. My first question goes to Ghana, and you said there are people who are suffering in Ghana. The technology has been around for some time. Up to today, there's no single crop or single technology that's in the hands of the farmers. Is that the fastest country that you, I would say, claim the government is quite supportive? Is that the fastest we can move when actually people are suffering? Secondly, you have indicated that this is a technology that could actually help people in Ghana, and maybe that goes to the other panelists as well. Do you have an idea by what proportions modern biotechnology will improve the food security situation in your countries? Then to my good friend from Zambia, as Lucia has mentioned, it's like you are very, very concerned about your current production systems and the current varieties. How are you controlling, say, natural changes, what sometimes could be called mutations, what you have? Because it seems like you have chosen to keep your biodiversity through the farmers. And I've seen, coming from Kenya, there are some varieties that farmers just left because they were not making sense, and they disappeared that way. Your case, do you see any reason or any risk when farmers may just drop other technologies that instead of maybe keeping through gene banks, you've chosen to keep with the farmers? Thank you.
Okay, and last we have Patricia.
Thank you, Sarah. My question goes to Philbert. I come from the Africa is Rising ideology, so I get very concerned when you say that we are having the issues we are having because someone in America or Europe is forcing our politicians from taking certain steps. Are you saying Africans, we don't have intellectual independence? If Europe is saying we shall not buy your organic food if you grow GM, when you look at the crops that we are improving, for goodness sake, we consume the crops ourselves. We consume our bananas, our cooking bananas, we consume our cassava. So if a European says, do not go GM, don't we have the ability to say, no, this is for our people, and we are going to pass the laws? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, great. So we're past time, so I just ask the panelists to answer what is burning, what responses are burning inside of you very quickly and punctually, and then we'll close. We'll start with Philbert this time.
So my question comes from Patricia. Where in the world we are controlled by what the global movement is? We cannot say Africa is isolated, or Africa can be isolating itself from the global agreement. That's why we don't have an African country with the nuclear weapon. We have nuclear scientists who can do it, but we are not doing it. It's because of the global agreement. So if at all America, I'm not saying they should come and do, but if at all Americans are not stopping funding NGOs that are stopping people from accessing the technology, we are going to still fight in our ground because they are putting in money, and those money may corrupt some people in our communities. So you find all the time you want to make a decision, there is a barrier. You end up in a big war. So to be safe is provide scientific information or fund where I know exactly my coin is going to make a positive difference and not to support anti-science movement. We have intellectual power, but even in Europe, if we are seeing there is a lot of countries that when the globe decide to go against the ideology, they end up in a big crisis. So as long as we're in this globe, we have to accept there is internal and external forces that influence the decision we are taking. And that's why we have a precautionary principle. It was obviously funded by one continent, and through the friendship and ties that that continent had with our politicians. Most of the people didn't know what they were passing. We have it now, and that's why we are struggling in every day, about 20 years, trying to change what they funded for that particular time. So the intellectuals that we have will not make a difference if the external forces keep and suppress the internal force that we have. Thank you.
Let me quickly try to answer Kennedy's question about the potentials of biotechnology in terms of food security in our various countries. Now, I'll give you an example in Nigeria. I was part of, it's just an example, a practical example. I was part of a media team that went on a tour of our BT cotton that is just in the last process of trial now. It's the farmers field trial that is on now. So we went to the field, we looked at the BT cotton, the BT cowpea farm, and when they spoke to us, they told us that in the same acre of land that they plant, that they got 3 times what they normally get on the same acre of land. And now, in terms of pesticides, they reduced spraying pesticides from 8 times to 2 times. And now when you check that, it is going to save our country 16 billion annually. What they are going to save from the normal spraying of pesticides. So this is just a small example. Spread it across other staple crops that we have, and we know that it has the potential, it's unquantifiable.
2 questions I will address. I'll try to be as brief as possible. The one on the 400 meters, what happened was we've been working with white corn for some time now. Then we had introduction of pro-vitamin A corn, which is orange in color. So when we incorporated it into the market, we noticed that there was a lot of cross-breeding, like cross-pollination between the white and the orange, and that was changing the final products we're getting. And so farmers said, okay, when it comes to the market wants either pure white or pure orange. We don't want to have any room for error in terms of crossing. So when the biotechnology came in, when doing the research that's currently ongoing in terms of handling and limitation, we said let's try by all means to increase the figure in terms of isolation distance to remove any possible chance of error because of the previous concerns. But in terms of the figure, it's still undergoing research to determine exactly what will work for our conditions. I hope I have answered that question. All right, then on natural limitations, how we drop some of the varieties that are there. Well, we are trying as much as possible to preserve whatever is favorable to the farming community, whatever our farmers say they need, whatever our farmers say works best for them and they need it, we try to preserve that. And whatever doesn't work with the farming community, eventually, through the natural law of selection, comes to cease, and we just get the parent material and preserve it in the gene banks. But all that happens through the natural law of selection and through the people's perceptions of the technologies that we have. If the people say they don't need it, then we don't impose it. We try to reduce it until we contain it. But we keep everything that we have on the market. I mean, we reserve whatever is offloaded. Okay, thank you.
Yes, indeed, it's true. Farmers are suffering, farmers are crying because their productivities are low. They don't get value for money for their labor. And again, there's reduction in cultivable land in Ghana. The arable lands are poor, infertile. So, yes, Ghana has signed the biosafety bill in 2011. That's about, I think, 6 years from today. And we haven't gone asleep. As I mentioned earlier, Ghana is into confined field trials. Of course, there is opposition to every new technology. There are opposition to the GM technology in Ghana. And Ghana is not a dictatorship country where the government will say, we are going straight, we are growing GM, and that's final. Obviously, you need to bring all on board so they understand the situation. If farmers understand the importance of biotechnology, again, when the GE technology came, a lot of myth has been created, and it's now very difficult to try to debunk those myths so that people will understand the science of the technology for them to accept the technology. In interaction with farmers in the US sometimes, I realized that to them, going GM or not GM is a business decision. They understood the science, they know what it entails, so for them there is no issue with some of the farmers. So if we could bring everyone on board, make the farmers and the general populace understand that yes, biotechnology is there and it has potential benefits, the myths are there, the myths are not true. I think it will go a long way to allowing people to adopt the GM crops to ensure that we are food insecure. And again, when the board was constituted, reconstituted recently, the board was charged to ensure that they embark on education so that people will understand the situation at hand. That yes, GM crops are there, they are there for our benefit. And it's not like a weapon that is created to wipe out what? The African continent. Of course, that is some of the myths people have created, that yes, GE technology is designed to wipe out the African continent. And we all know that that is not the case. So yes, education is essential, and that is an area, that is what brought me to Cornell anyway, to ensure, to know how to communicate the science effectively so it will make impact. So I believe we are not too far from ensuring food security in Ghana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we close, a couple of announcements that if you're interested in this topic, there is going to be a screening of the film Food Evolution next Wednesday down at Cinemapolis at 7 p.m. And this issue on a more global scale will be explored in that film, and we'll have a panel discussion afterwards with some representation from Uganda. And next week, back in this room at the same hour, we'll have Medha Devar come and talk about big data and agricultural research for development, a CGIAR perspective. And of course, Medha is a former Cornellian, so we'll welcome her back next week. Before we close, please join me in thanking Philbert, Nkechi, Ackson, and Daniel.